Hello, Kaja. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the meeting. I look forward to another productive meeting of this important group. Thank you for being here.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. And I will turn it over to Bertrand now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kaja. I'll start by providing you all with the meeting protocols. So please note that only ACUS members, including government members, public members, senior fellows, liaison representatives, and special counsels, whether or not on the committee, and their designated alternates have full speaking privileges. To avoid background noise, though, I'd ask that you keep your microphone on mute and either use Zoom's hand raise feature or add a comment in the chat feature if you'd like to speak. I'll then call on you and you can unmute yourself. Please then remute yourself when you're done. I'd also ask that ACUS members and their designated alternates use the webcam to facilitate conversation. With respect to attendees other than ACUS members and alternatives, participation requires the unanimous consent of the committee members. Time permitting, I'll consider calling on such attendance at appropriate points and will presume that committee members consent absent their raising an objection. If any such participant would like to speak, please so indicate in the chat feature or by using Zoom's hand raise feature and wait to speak until I call on you. You can then unmute yourself and please remute yourself when you are done speaking. Welcome everyone to our second committee on rulemaking discussion of virtual engagement. Oh wait, is that it? I still have something else to say. Oh, never mind. I'm not done with my protocols. Page 2. For all participants, please use the chat feature only to indicate that you'd like to speak, or for committee members and their alternates to vote when asked. Please do not hold any sidebar discussions or put substantive comments in the chat feature. Only members of the rulemaking committee, including government members and their designated alternates, public members, senior fellows, liaison representatives, and special counsels have a vote. Please do not vote unless you're a member of the committee. We have a list of committee members in case you are unsure. Okay, so now I'm actually done with protocol. I want to welcome all of you all to the Committee on Rulemaking, our second session on virtual public engagement and agency rulemaking. Not only the staff council, but also our in-house researcher, Kaja Nowaki, is the consultant for today, and I thank her again for the report that was the genesis for the recommendations that we have here. The recommendations include 4 different parts. One's on virtual public engagement planning, the second on notice, the third on managing virtual public engagements, and the fourth on recording and transcripts. We will work through the recommendations first, and then we'll return to the preamble. The preamble wasn't included in the last version that we have, so this will be a new part of the discussion, and we'll discuss those after we discuss the preamble after we work through the recommendations. But before we initiate this process, I wanted to ask if Kaja had anything she wanted to add based on what may have been done between meetings or anything else, and then I will proceed with recommendations.
Not too much to add. Obviously, as Bertrand just said, we added the preamble. Other than that, you'll see when I pull up the recommendations, I just left some comments from our last meeting that have all been addressed, just so everybody's on the same page. So for example, recommendation 1, we had talked about reiterating aspects of recommendation 2018-7, so that has been incorporated, but I just left the comments there to flag for everybody. So other than that, just the preamble.
Great. Thanks so much, Kaja. So why don't we just pull up the recommendations and start on page 3 of the draft recommendation for committee report that we have. Okay, and I hope that's visible to everyone. Try to kind of get this going. There we go. Okay, try to do this both. Okay, so I'll proceed as I did last time, in which I'll give you an opportunity to read each recommendation. Then I'll ask you one by one, and then I'll ask you after reading each recommendation if there are any comments or feedback that folks would want to incorporate into our discussion, and then we'll proceed with the discussion from there. If there are no comments or feedback, we'll continue on to the next recommendation. So let's start with the first recommendation under virtual public engagement planning. I'll give you some time to read that first recommendation before asking for comments and suggestions. Okay, so are there any comments on suggestions with respect to the first recommendation? And please also let me know if at any point I'm going too quickly, and I will slow down for everyone. Okay, having heard no comments or suggestions with respect to the first recommendation, we'll kind of move forward to recommendation number 2. There were no changes made to this recommendation between meetings. Any comments or thoughts or suggestions with respect to recommendation number 2? It will move forward to recommendation number 3. There was some change in language with respect to recommendation number 3 between meetings. That's highlighted in the comments on the side. Any comments or suggestions with respect to recommendation number 3? Okay, we'll move forward to recommendation number 4. There have been no changes to the recommendation between the first and the second meeting. Okay, any comments or suggestions with respect to recommendation number 4? Okay, moving along to recommendation number 5. Any comments or suggestions with respect to recommendation number 5? So we'll move forward to recommendation number 6, and I'll group these by 3. Go A, B, C, then D, E, F, then G, H. So we'll start with recommendation number 6, A through C. Any comments or suggestions with respect to recommendation 6, A through C? Okay, let's move forward. Oh, Karen?
Yes, I finally got my volume to work.
Okay, great. Great to have you here. I'm glad it's working now. Okay.
Hi, this is Dave Rosker. Question on the wording of 6B. It wasn't completely clear to me grammatically where the dial-in number fits into this. It would seem that the dial-in number should be perhaps subject to a registration page as well. But here it seems that it's in parallel, so that it's saying you must give the dial-in number for the meeting in the notice. So I wasn't completely sure whether the intent was direct links to what? And where does the dial-in number fit into that?
Option numbers include direct links to the internet-based video conferencing event or registration page and the dial-in number for the meeting at the beginning of the notice. And so the question is an ambiguity with respect to what the dial-in number refers to. Is that the question? I'm sorry.
I don't think it's necessarily correct that the dial-in number should be at the beginning of the notice.
Okay.
And it reads right now as if you can either put a link to the video conference event or the registration page, but regardless, you must put the dial-in number in for the meeting at the beginning of the notice.
Got it.
don't know if that's the intent. It may just have been a remnant of past edits.
Okay,
It would seem that there should be an option for, offering an option for remote attendance with either information for participation or registration.
okay. Okay, and then Kaja, thanks, Dave. Kaja?
Yeah, just to respond to that. So the reason that these are separate is for the purpose of, if people are going to be attending via video link or through Zoom, for example, right? We want them to go to a registration page or just be able to access the event. The dial-in is for people who cannot or have trouble accessing video conferencing services. So perhaps they don't have reliable broadband, so they're not able to register to attend the meeting through the internet, or they're not able to attend the actual meeting through the internet. So the intent behind that was to include the dial-in number for people who are unable to attend via internet.
I'll go back to Dave before turning to Peter. Dave, is that responsive to your concern?
I understand the intent now. I am still not sure that publication of the dial-in number in an announcement for the meeting is an appropriate requirement. Perhaps there needs to be a alternative means of registration. But I do think it's within an agency's right to manage distribution of a phone number for those meetings, given that they're asked to manage the meetings, and especially since the agencies are also paying for phone lines. And I've been on more than one public meeting where the phone lines jam up and people who did register were unable to participate. And so maybe this needs to be split if the intent is to ensure that there is accessibility for people with low to no broadband. And to clarify the reasoning behind, not only making sure that you provide a dial-in number, but making sure that you provide a means by which the dial-in number can be obtained by people who similarly don't have access.
So with the idea here being, Dave, just trying to understand it, is you're trying to, in a sense, limit access to the number because of the concern about overload and misuse of dial-in information, but it's important you recognize to provide access to those who do not have access to broadband internet. So would it be something as according to the lines of dial-in number upon request to the agency, or how would we kind of square those two challenges in terms of access to those who do not have video conferencing and those concerns that you've raised, Dave?
Let me type something up,
Okay.
stick it in the chat box,
Okay.
and maybe we'll come back to this concern.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks, Dave. Peter?
I have the same discomfort, I think, as my friend David does. And part of mine comes to, there are times, unfortunately, when we're working with the IT people who make the arrangements for all of this. And, the conference call-in numbers can change over time. So I'm a little worried about putting something in there that is in the notice that by the time you actually have the event, there may be changes. I think Dave's right. What happens if you have enough lines? The other concern I have as well is right now we're talking about a dial-in number, but technology changes so fast. What happens in a year from now? Will this language have any meaning? And I'm just wondering, I think we're so close to the end, so I'm happy just to say this, and if nobody has the stomach to address it, but could we have language that instead of saying a dial-in number, saying other equivalent access? I just know in the last year or two from my office, we've gone from WebEx to Teams, I don't know what is next. We no longer use Zoom for a lot of our engagements. So I'm a little worried about having a specific type of technology. And maybe it's just that we have something equivalent to it. Again, I know we're near the end. Maybe folks don't want to make that change, but I think that would alleviate some of the concern maybe that Dave has too. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Jeremy.
How about something like options for remote attendance, along with directions for accessing the meeting, e.g. a link to the video conferencing event, a dial-in number, close paren, or a direct link to a registration page, which leaves open the two options. I think we handle the digital divide issue in a separate recommendation.
Got it. Thanks for that suggested language, Jeremy. And come back to Dave. I know that you're perhaps drafting alternative language, but would that be responsive to the concerns that you raised?
I think you are. Give me a second. I actually have, I almost have a sentence for you.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Okay. Any other thoughts on this change in language as Dave works through his suggestion? I mean, I think that I appreciate this because it does give a better sense of optionality here, in the sense that it doesn't feel as mandated as perhaps the language of
All right.
No.
Straw man here in the chat for you.
Okay. So I see my chat. Where is my chat? Okay. Okay, direct links to the internet base. Yep. Okay. So in that might run into sort of Peter's concern about changing technology. Are we worried that broadband internet might not be a cognizable technology in a couple of years?
I think given the manner in which the FCC has engaged on the issue, I think we have a fixed set of terminology for at least the length of time it takes for FCC to do rulemaking, so maybe a decade or two.
Right. Okay. Fair.
No offense to any FCC members on the line.
All right. Okay, so we have two proposals here. We have the proposal set forth by Jeremy and the proposal set forth by Dave. I guess I'll come back to Jeremy now. Your thoughts on Dave's proposal, or
I will defer to the committee here. I was just trying to bring together different thoughts into language, but I defer to the committee completely.
Okay. Committee members want to speak on the two options with respect to language in 6B.
I will only say with regards to my language that I think there's value in highlighting the reason to provide alternative options.
Yeah, I appreciate that aspect of your recommended change.
Yeah.
Any other committee thoughts on the language and particularly preference between the two options? Yes, Peter.
Since I'm a fool's rush in, I'm happy to share. I do think Dave's meets the interest I expressed. I think it's okay. I think Jeremy's is equally fine, but if Dave as a committee member puts that forward, yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. So why don't we go with, unless there's an objection, we'll have option 2 be the recommended change. And then I'll have us kind of go through 6A through C again with the new language to see if there are any additional suggestions or feedback. Okay. So let's move forward to 6D through F. Any thoughts or feedback on 6D through F? Okay, so let's go to now 6G and H. Any thoughts or feedback on 6G through H? All right. So let's move forward to recommendation number 7. Okay. Yes, Dave.
I will follow up on the edits from above with regards to the link to internet-based video conferencing event or its registration page. This would be another place to insert information on accessing the event for people without access to broadband internet.
Okay. So drawing from the language set forth in 6B.
Alternative options for members, you know.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, great. Yes, Adam.
So I just noticed something in the wording of recommendation 7. I don't have a strong view on it either way. It kind of jumped out at me. In the very first line, to encourage remote participation. I wonder, I've taken sort of the general tenor of the recommendation and the preamble to say that agencies should make this available for remote participation. We're encouraging the agencies to provide these tools. Here we're encouraging the agencies to encourage people to use the tools. And I wondered if that's a little bit further than the rest of the recommendations go. Again, I'm totally agnostic on it. It may well be that that's what we're trying to do, but I just thought it was interesting that here we really are trying to get the agencies to not just make the tools available and publicly, you know, and to publicize their availability, but we're suggesting here that we actually want agencies to encourage people to use the tools.
Right. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I do notice that now. Kasia, is there a reason why we have language encourage as opposed to make available or something like that?
No, I mean, we could certainly change it to like the word facilitate might be more
Facilitate.
appropriate here.
Yeah, okay. So why don't we substitute, Adam, would that be responsive to your comments to facilitate as opposed to encourage?
Totally. And I honestly, I would also be totally fine with leaving it in place. I don't have a strong view either way. It kind of jumped out at me as something that was slightly different than the rest.
Okay.
So if anybody would prefer to keep it in, I wouldn't object.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. Dave.
I wonder if Adam's concern would be resolved by striking the word remote. Because I think it is a very interesting play where we generally encourage agencies, we generally want agencies to encourage all participation. And I think you were right that there might be an emphasis on encouraging. Remote participation makes it sound like we're encouraging people to go remote rather than in person.
Right.
But if we simply say to encourage participation in a rulemaking engagement, then we're simply providing this tool as not an alternative to in-person, but as a means of a broadening engagement.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. So we have two possibilities here. We can either talk about facilitating remote engagement or to encourage or to facilitate remote participation or to encourage participation. And then, of course, what follows would be describing opportunities to participate through other means than being in person. Any sort of thoughts on those two options? I kind of like the to encourage participation myself, because that's the goal of what we're trying to do. Adam, what's your thoughts?
I agree with what you just said, Virtual.
Yeah, okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. So I'll allow you all to read through number 7 again, with the change in language, and then come back to you to see if there are any additional thoughts or suggestions. Any other thoughts and suggestions with respect to number 7? Okay, so let's move forward to recommendation number 8. Any thoughts on recommendation number 8? Okay. And then move on to recommendation number 9. So Nina had to drop off for an appointment, and she'll be back at some point in the meeting. But she, on number 9, she suggests that the details should be on regulations.gov as well as the Federal Register website. And so she suggests adding, I believe, regulations.gov in addition. And this is not particular to number 9, but she says somewhere in the recommendation should mention the new executive order 14094. But let me go with Emily.
I guess I just have a question, which is, can OFR update regulations.gov?
Does anybody have the answer to that question?
No, that was my comment. It's GSA and the e-rulemaking project that runs it. So I mean, it's not a bad recommendation, but it wouldn't fit with a recommendation directed to OFR.
Okay. Should there be a recommendation directed to GSA? Can we make a recommendation to GSA?
Yeah.
So we could say OFR should update federalregister.gov and GSA should update regulations.gov to include in the docket. I mean, do they both have document detail sidebars though? I mean, it kind of gets a little clunky if they don't really have.
So the way that this works is there's a sidebar on the Federal Register. The sidebar is run by regulations.gov, so it's kind of intertwined. So I think it would be appropriate to put both.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't really have a good sense of how this all runs. Emily.
So should it be like OFR and GSA should work together to update? I mean, like if they're intertwined and if we're not sure about exactly how to phrase this in a way that will make sense to the people we're speaking to, then can we ask the committee on style to figure out what the mechanics are well enough to phrase it appropriately.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So we'll just have that as a comment to incorporate, but to figure out who to direct that recommendation to. Okay. Okay. All right, so any other comments on 9? Okay, before moving forward, I wanted to come back to 6G to be responsive to Karen Levin's comment. I don't know if her mic is working or not, or it was actually.
Is
Yeah.
it working now?
It is.
Good.
And so your recommendation need a comma and an additional word to make clear that location should be provided for each and not just for minutes. Okay, got it. It'd be the availability and location of a recording, a transcript, a summary, or minutes.
Yeah, I think that makes clear that
Okay.
it applies to each of them in the list.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that. Any objections to that change to 6G? Okay. Let's move down to recommendation number 10 then. Any comments or feedback on recommendation number 10? Yes, Dave.
I mean, I appreciate that it says when feasible. But I do worry about, I do worry about capacity. And when we say all comers at any time.
Right. And is the when feasible language, you believe, insufficient? Does that, or is it?
I think it puts a, I think it puts a, I think it makes things hard to plan by requiring it to be sort of integrated into the planning. You know, the first thing you have to ask is, well, can we do it in a way that doesn't require an RSVP in advance?
Right.
Right. I mean, I can understand the impetus, the goal of universal participation. But it makes me uncomfortable asking agencies to plan for universal participation.
Okay. Kaja?
So maybe this is unclear the way it's currently worded, but the way that it's currently worded is that registration is not needed to observe the event through a live stream, which is not necessarily the same as participating through Zoom, for example. So, you know, one of the previous recommendations indicated that a live stream should be made available for all meetings. That should not be taxing on agencies if they're just streaming live to YouTube.
Okay.
It's probably something I should have picked up after enough seasons of broadcasting my kids' hockey club, but I don't actually know what sort of assets are required to do a public YouTube live stream with an expectation of significant viewership.
I'll just tell you that we do it for the ACUS plenary.
Yeah.
So in addition to having our Zoom components, we also, there's just I don't know if it's free, Jeremy can probably answer that, but it is free. You just connect it to YouTube account. YouTube has its own capabilities, and you know, it's nothing for us to run or do.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead. Others should weigh in on this as I'm still cogitating.
Got it. Yes, Peter.
I was just going to say, DOL similar to ACUS, we've done the same thing with DOL events, live streaming them to YouTube. And again, I'm not an IT guy, but we've had no problems, right? You know, sort of allowing for a national audience to participate. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Maria.
Would it make sense to then maybe put an emphasis that this is for observation? Because right now we just have it reading as interested persons to access a public rulemaking. So maybe just interested persons to observe 101, sorry, that's where it starts. So that way we put an emphasis on the observation and put it up front. And that way people don't think, because Dave's point about participation is a very valid one. And there is a concern when you have a lot of people registering for it, but I also interpreted this in terms of this is just, we're not trying to make people register or submit any information if they just want to like look at a live stream. So like I live, for instance, in DC. So anytime, you know, the council is having meetings, I can just go on their website and pop into the whatever committee meetings are happening without having to actually register for them.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks, Maria. What about this language? Oh, I think you might be doing it exactly how I'm thinking about it. I was thinking, when feasible, each agency should allow interested persons to observe a live stream of public rulemaking engagements or of a public rulemaking engagement remotely at any time while it is occurring, and should not require members of the public to register by a certain date or time. Yeah, that's it. Oh, gosh, you're amazing. All right. So that's kind of one thought in terms of what we could do to make clear the focal point. Yes, Dave.
I think I'm seeing now sort of where I've sort of gone a little wrong on this. And I'm wondering perhaps if, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been, you know, in and out on this conversation. Is this the first time we've mentioned live stream for observation? Because if a live stream for observation is what we want, then shouldn't it be part of the notice? Shouldn't it be part of the website? If we want this universal ability, and it's part of the recommendation, then it really should be part of the public notice and integrated into the consideration of the public engagement. Here it seems tacked on. And to a certain extent, it's because we did, you know, we are emphasizing engagement and public engagement. But I think my confusion is that it you know, here appearing all the way down in this recommendation, something that should be integrated into the planning. So did I miss something? I guess that's the first question. And if I didn't miss something, then I think that a link for a live stream for people to observe should be integrated into 6 and 7.
So try to be responsive here. I don't think it's certainly not the only thing that this recommendation is proposing. There are more active forms of remote engagement that.
Okay, I
the
see it there in
recommendation-
7, yeah.
Yeah, but it is certainly true that I don't think that there is. So yeah, is this live stream engagement while it's current? Okay. Yeah, so we have it there.
Yeah,
And then-
so we're describing something in full, and our purpose for it, but it seems like it needed to be explained earlier.
Right, so maybe there is a space to include it within the first notice paragraph in number 6. I'm trying to figure out whether it fits or not. Right. Maybe it could be in 6E. Seems like.
I wouldn't confuse 6E. 6E is about participation.
Right, but in terms of.
So 6D is a link to the webpage described in recommendations. It's a bit more embedded. So I don't know if you want to separate that specifically, but it says a link to the webpage described in recommendation 7, and then recommendation itself includes the live stream.
Got it. Right, so it's embedded in 6D. I see. Right.
Yeah, sorry for the monkey wrench there. Perhaps maybe in 7, rather than trying to integrate it here into 6, because I could read between the lines here about 6B, including the live stream. But perhaps in 7, we say, we describe the live stream a little bit more in terms of what its purpose is.
In terms of
The public, a live stream for the public to observe the engagement.
okay. So a live stream for the public to observe the engagement while it is occurring. Could be a change that we make to number 7. It would be the second to last line in 7. So
Yeah,
include.
yeah, I'm just feeling that there's not enough context around the live stream of the engagement since it is the first mention.
Okay, so in terms of proposed language, would it be something to emphasize that it's an opportunity to observe?
I think
public
that's, yeah.
engagement? So a live stream for the public to observe the engagement while it is occurring could be one potential edit.
That little bit addition certainly adds clarity to the intent.
Okay, so for the public to observe. Okay. Any sort of objections to that change in the language in 7 that other folks here might have, or suggestions with respect to that language?
And now with regards to 10, I'm going to get a little radical and ask if we are using if we're using live stream of this technology, do we want there to be any registration requirement at all? Is that a necessary part of this recommendation? Or should the recommendation be that the live stream should be available to the public without registration?
So that's a recommendation to take out the and should not require members of the public to register by a certain date or time.
I would say no, I would say strike the by certain date or time, not require the public to register.
Okay, got it. And should not require the public to register. So the proposed is to eliminate by a certain date or time. And so again, I'm not sort of an expert in live streaming technology. Others have experience with it. Does it make sense to recommend not including a registration requirement at all?
Yeah, well, if we're strictly talking about a live stream, and I think we've determined that the technology already exists and is in regular usage within the federal government. It is not particularly resource intensive, and there are no artificial limits on the number of participants. Then I think the question should be whether agencies need a registration and whether a registration might discourage public participation.
Yes, Kaja.
No, I think that this is a better way to phrase it for a number of reasons too, because I think when you phrase it like this, then you're not just saying a certain date or time, but for example, if you're live streaming through something that requires a user to register in order to access the live stream, I don't know if that exists, but that could be something that exists as a barrier. This kind of assuages my concerns for that as well.
Okay. Any other comments regarding to that change of language or any other change in language in recommendation number 10? Okay.
Well, thank you all for your patience while I figured this out in my
Yeah,
head.
no, appreciate your input there. Thank you. So let's move on to 11. Again, we have a multi-parter here, so we'll divide it up into 3 and 3. And we'll go 11A through C. Any comments and suggestions on 11A through C? Okay, now 11D through F. Any comments or suggestions with respect to 11D through F? Okay, well, let's move forward to recommendation number 12 then. Any comments or suggestions with respect to recommendation number 12? All right, so let's move to the last section on recordings and transcripts. Recommendation number 13. Any comments or feedback to recommendation number 13? Yes, Maria.
All right, could you scroll back up to 7? Because I'm reading that we're asking to put it in the public docket and then also on the webpage, but I think we have a link to the docket on the webpage in 7, but I don't know for sure.
Scroll back to 7.
Thank you.
Yep. And so what would be your suggestion here, Maria?
I was just double checking if we
Okay.
already said that we had a public docket, but I don't see the link to the docket in the web page.
Okay.
So then I have no suggestion. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, thanks, Maria. Any other? Okay, I'll come back to 13 then. And ask if there are any thoughts or suggestions with respect to 13. Okay, and now recommendation number 14. All right. Okay, any suggestions or recommendation with 14? If not, we'll move all the way back to the beginning, to the preamble. It's not possible to put that whole first paragraph on the page with the footnotes, huh, Kaja? Like the next 2 lines on the next page? No, it's not. Okay, we'll just kind of work with what we have here. Oh, okay, cool. So that's why we just kind of go through the first paragraph, which is lines 1 through 15. Let's start with you, Alexander.
Hi, just a observation. The way like 6 to 8 is worded, it kind of makes it sound that public meetings are held only when they're required to be held, and not otherwise, when in fact a lot of them are done, voluntarily. So I would maybe tweak the language there to put in that public meetings can also be held voluntarily when an agency wants to engage.
Okay, any context. Okay. And so it would be recognizing that opportunities for oral presentation are not based on statutes, presidential directives, agency rules, and policies alone. Exactly. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, this might be a stylistic one in terms of incorporating within that. Can't come up with the good language right there. Recognizing that there are opportunities for voluntary forms of public engagement. We'll come to Kirti, and then we'll come to Kaja.
I had a question about the final sentence of this paragraph, and specifically the last clause. The conference has encouraged them to do so in ways that safeguard the integrity of the rulemaking process. I'm assuming this is a reference to the rules governing ex parte contacts and things like that. But the first time I read this sentence, it seemed like perhaps outside people might be a threat, and so they needed to be safeguarded against. So I was wondering if maybe, if I'm correctly understanding the purpose of that clause, it could be something like the conference has encouraged them to do so consistent with rules governing the integrity of the rulemaking process, or something along those lines. I'm not wedded to the language, but that's the thing that jumped out at me when I read that sentence.
So consistent with rules governing the integrity of the rulemaking process, is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just kind of taking all comments and kind of about the different additions and subtractions and suggested additions going forward. So that's one proposal with respect to change in language. Thank you, Kirti. Kaja.
Yeah, so I just wanted to come back to Alex's point on 6 through 8. 10 through 13 kind of get at that voluntariness where agencies might want to hold engagements when it's not required, but would be beneficial to do so. So, you know, if the committee wants more, I guess, emphasis on the voluntariness, that might be a better place to put it. And then I also just wanted to make sure that you knew Nina had a comment, but I see she just rose her hand.
Okay, yes, thank you, Kasia. Okay, so I'll go to Nina and then come back to Alexander to see if that would be a better place to put the voluntary engagement opportunities. Yes, Nina.
Yeah, I don't know if this has already been raised. I had to be off the call for a few minutes, but it just seemed to me that line 3 would be a great place to include a reference to brand new Executive Order 14094, which specifically talks about broader engagement efforts by agencies and more inclusive engagement efforts by agencies.
Okay.
So,
yeah, got it.
okay.
No, go, please, Nina, continue.
No, that said, I didn't actually have language yet. I think it probably needs to go after rulemakings in line 2. The law often requires agencies to give interested persons an opportunity to participate in rulemakings. Executive Order 14094 instructs executive agencies to proactively engaged interested parties, including members of underserved communities. That would be, there's a lot more in this. This is in section 2C, but that might be a good start.
Okay.
Do you want me to type that in the chat or?
Yeah, if you have it readily accessible to you, that would be great.
I'll just type it in.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And then we could kind of figure out in terms of how to sort of incorporate that language in lines between 1 and 3. And perhaps after that first clause, that sentence, or
okay.
Great.
If you want to just come back to me.
Yes, for sure. Okay. So we're not necessarily wedded to that place or that particular language with respect to Executive Order 14094, but yes, I agree. It's important to incorporate that into this preamble. Okay. Other thoughts, and this could be both related to Nina's suggested addition, which we're not concretely wedded to in terms of its form or place, or Kirti's suggested addition, or also sort of the point with respect to voluntary opportunities for engagement that Alexander raised. Yes, Kevin.
Yeah, just I like Nina's suggestion. It seems like it's here, and I think maybe, suppose for example, maybe also. So Executive Order also.
Executive Order 14094 also instructs agencies to practically engage in state. Okay. Ooh, that sounds threatening. Hope everyone's okay.
So I just added some language in the chat function.
Okay.
And although I rephrased it slightly, but it more or less tracks what you put in there. The only thing I would say is I think it belongs after the law and before the administrative conference, just to as a matter of recognizing, presidential status.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Although the ACUS is very important, Nina. I want that to be
I
Seems like-
cannot disagree.
Okay. Great. All right, so I feel good about that. If we could, once you finish working through that, maybe scroll up a little bit to Curtie's language to make sure folks are on board, or what I sort of how I interpreted Curtie's language. I don't know if I got it exactly right. Okay. And then it's a little tricky. It's perfect. Okay. And then also, I don't know if Alexander has any thoughts on whether what's included in lines 10 through 12, or is it 10 through 12? Now it's 12 through 15 are responsive to the point with respect to voluntary.
I'm thinking maybe on at the beginning of line 8, maybe say, an agency can have many reasons for providing an opportunity for oral presentation, including
Okay. Including statute.
and then maybe adding in or a desire to communicate with its stakeholders. Because that adds that voluntary aspect at the end of it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that second part one more time?
So I would just add at the end of the list of like directives, agency rules and policies, or an opportunity or a desire to better communicate with interested parties. And then like maybe end of sentence there at that point.
So there's been that proposed change in language. Thank you, Alexander. Thoughts on that change in language, as well as others that have been proposed with respect to paragraph 1 of the preamble, the long paragraph 1 of the preamble. Maybe it makes sense to paragraph break before the sentence that Alexander suggested. I don't know if the topics relevant or different enough to allow for a paragraph break. But maybe not, I don't know. Curious in terms of your thoughts or readability. What if they are too intimately connected, what comes before? Maybe not. So an agency can have remarries or providing opportunities for position, including all right, so I'll allow folks to kind of read through now we have as paragraph 1, and then we'll kind of scroll down to get the entirety of paragraph 2. Let's kind of work through paragraph 1 first and make sure there's no other comments or suggestions with respect to that. Paragraph 1 that starts with line 1, it ends at line 8. Any thoughts or suggestions, any additional thoughts or suggestions with respect to that first paragraph? Okay, so now let's display the entire paragraph 2, which is 9 through 20. Yes, Kaja.
I'm really stuck on this first sentence, the way it's currently worded. I'm happy to, take a stab at this as a committee on style thing, unless someone else has language that they would like to propose. But I think as it currently reads right now, I don't understand how an agency can have many reasons for oral presentation, and then statutes, presidential directives, and agency rules, policies are reasons. To me, that doesn't totally sound right.
Yeah. I'm getting tripped up on it a little bit too. Emily.
Could you just say an agency may provide an opportunity for oral presentation because of?
Because of would be because of requirements set in statutes, presidential directives, and agency rules and policies, or a desire to to communicate. I don't know if that responds to Kaja's language concerns, or even that's appropriate to include. Is that sounding any better, Kaja, or are you still? Yeah. And of course, welcome all other suggestions, including jettisoning it. All right. Any other comments on the second paragraph, lines 9 through 20? Okay. Well, why don't we scroll up to the third paragraph, and Kaji actually said, certainly feels like there's committee on style suggestions for additional changes to that. That's just objections from the committee. Okay, we'll go through the paragraph 3, which is currently on the draft before us, 21 through 26. Any comments or suggestions on paragraph 3, lines 21 through 26? All right. Why don't we move to paragraph 4, lines 27 through 31? Any thoughts or comments on paragraph 4, lines 27 through 31? I'll move to the last long paragraph, paragraph 5, that starts on line 27 and extends to line 38. Or no, I guess 32 to 43. Sorry, I'm looking at my draft. 32 to 43. Any comments or feedback on the last paragraph, lines 32 to 43? Okay. So having heard no additional comments or suggestions, I think that concludes for now our our assessment of the preamble and recommendations. Changes will be incorporated into the next draft. I don't believe, or I guess I'll ask the committee members whether there is an anticipated need for a third meeting to discuss the draft recommendations. It feels like we've made the progress, and perhaps we can share the final draft over email and see if there's any additional comments or calls for a third meeting based on the next draft that's produced. But I don't feel a need that we necessarily need to call a first meeting or a third meeting, or necessarily have a third meeting at this point, unless there's objections to that. All right. Okay. Yes, Lon.
I hate to raise this now. Can we just take a look at 13 for a minute, recommendation 13?
Sure.
I just had a question.
Uh-huh.
The second sentence says that before publishing an NPRM, the agency should record, transcribe, summarize, or prepare minutes. And then the first sentence says that after the NPRM is published, it should record or transcribe. I'm just wondering why more limited then. You can't, it's saying you have to record or transcribe.
Oh, yeah, got it. I see.
Yeah, so I was wondering why we're more limited there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, Kaja, you have thoughts on the choice?
Yeah, I think this kind of goes to some of the ex parte and transparency issues. So prior to an NPRM being issued, perhaps, you know, agencies don't want the full meeting disclosed. So they might summarize or prepare meeting minutes, which are generally higher level. Whereas after the NPRM has been published, they should provide as much detail as possible. And if they're already doing a live stream, frankly, it should be quite easy to just do a recording. So that's, I think this generally surrounds like some of the ex parte communication issues.
But excuse me, ex parte meeting can occur after the NPRM is published, right? So I just, if that's true,
sorry, I meant like the ex parte issues occurring before an NPRM is issued. So I think, yeah, generally the issue is that, you know, agencies don't have to record some of the meetings that occur before an NPRM is issued. Yeah.
But you think they have to record?
I think. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's okay. But after an NPRM, everything should be recorded?
Yeah.
I mean, even a public hearing has to be recorded?
Yes. Or transcribed.
That's what we're saying here, but the thing is, as a matter of law, that has to happen?
No, that's part of the recommendation.
Recommendation, yeah.
That would be a big change for the agency I used to work for. They never recorded any of these.
I think if they're doing a remote, right, this is about like remote participation anyway. So if they're already engaging in Zoom, for example, right, it's very easy to record it. Are you more concerned about the technological capabilities or,
no.
Okay.
No, I used to beg people to come to hearings and talk to us, and they wouldn't do it. And I never took that personally, by the way. But I just thought if they know they're being recorded, I think people are going to be at least my agency, they'd be very reluctant to attend or say anything. And I think it would really, it goes to the last part of the second sentence. It would adversely affect the willingness. I think that would adversely affect willingness after the NPR. I mean, I had people that wouldn't they all wanted private meetings because they didn't want to announce what they thought their tax positions were. Some people thought it would trigger an examination. Some people thought that, they might lose, some law firms, accounting firms would lose clients if they expressed a view like that. I just think, and again, if it's one agency, maybe we don't worry about it. But I just thought that, summary of what was said should be sufficient after an NPRM.
So would your suggestion, Lon, be to include language unless doing so would adversely affect the willingness of public participants in after the first two sentences or first two lines of recommendation 13?
That would work, or it's the same rule for both. You don't need two separate sentences.
Sure.
Either before or after, that would be that would also work.
Okay.
So again, I don't know. Maybe it's unique to the agency I work for, but I don't know.
All right. Other thoughts on Lon's suggestion and concerns raised? And we'll kind of work with that language in 13 so it's not redundant or repetitive, I mean. Any objections to including that? And I guess it's ultimately about, do we want to push for this level of transparency and I guess accounting through suggestion that these things be recorded or transcribed without any qualifications, or do we want to acknowledge and recognize that it may chill participation in ways that would be counterproductive? Having heard no objections, then we will incorporate that concern into recommendation number 13. Thank you, Lon. Guys, going back all the way through, any other sort of comments on any other part of the recommendations or the preamble that anyone wants to raise right now? Okay, well, I believe that we are done here. Again, Kaja, Jeremy, and the folks at ACUS will work on incorporating these changes into the draft recommendation, and then we'll share it with all of you. We will decide then whether there's any need for a third meeting. Until then, I hope you guys are having a lovely spring day. And for all those professors out there, I hope you're surviving the madness of the end of the semester. And I will look forward to seeing you all very soon.
Thank you, Bertrand. Great job, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Bye.